Hello. I want to start off by acknowledging the table groups that are here. So we have Nevada County Pride. Yay. And then Citizens for Choice. Yay. And last but not least, Turning Pages. Thank you. So Atticus Finch said, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." My name is Lisa Turlow, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Nevada County, AAUW. It is my pleasure to bring you our second diversity-themed program. Last year, we heard from students of color who attended our high schools, and it was a very illuminating session. And so I'm very happy today that this year we'll be talking about LGBTQ plus, and the students will be from our high school and even college. This will be led by Maddox Eckerling. Maddox, yay. Maddox is a fierce advocate for LGBTQ rights in our community, and he is in his first year at San Francisco State University. We will introduce the other panelists as we go on. Now we're actually going to hear from Dr. Rhea Williamson, my dear friend, and the chair of our local scholarship committee. She will trace her journey as an academic and as a lesbian woman. So I'm not going to go further. She will give you lots of details about her life as she goes on. Over to you, Rhea.
Thank you so much. I'm used to talking about water treatment and, parameters of concern in creeks, not me, but here goes. To start, this presentation is based on my experiences, but I think I'm representative of an entire generation of folks. I was asked to speak a little bit about what it was like growing up gay in the 1970s and to give a couple of examples of experiences from high school through college, in the workforce, and how times might have changed. I think you first have to think that times have changed and believe that, and I'm not so sure myself, personally, based on my experiences and today's current climate. But I do think that coming out, that process of being true to yourself and telling people who you are, truthfully, has changed. When I was, certainly when I compare today to when I was a young kid, there were really few role models back then. I mean, even Rock Hudson hadn't come out, right? I think many of you know who that is. Maybe not the panel. But then, even to be suspected of being gay was to be a target. When my sweet gay brother, there are 2 out of 5 of us in my Catholic family are gay, when my sweet gay brother was pushed by football players into briar patches, it wasn't because he was cute, which he was, but it was because he was different. When I was looking for information that might help me to understand what I was feeling as a questioning young girl, I did what an academic does, because even then I was academic, right? I went to the library and I searched under the word homosexuality. And the only thing that I found was a reference that listed homosexuality as a mental health disorder. And that was in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Some of you are therapists, you know the DSM well, of mental disorders. And that classified homosexuality, thank you, as a mental disorder from 1952, in its very first edition, until 1973, which is the year I graduated from high school. And homosexuality wasn't fully removed from that tome until the 5th edition in 2013, which is 11 years ago? So you'll hear this next phrase many times during this talk. Discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant. Today is very different from the days of my youth. Young people today, they have gay-straight alliances in their schools. There are nonprofits that provide scholarships for LGBTQ plus students. There are movies and books and chat rooms and websites, and I don't even know all the stuff nowadays. It's also, I mean, squares or cubed, whatever that thing was that she was talking about. And there are public forums like this that bring together people from across the generations so that we can talk about things, we can learn about each other, we can figure out ways to communicate, and maybe we can help each other. I also think there's a much better general acceptance by many parents, spiritual leaders, friends, teachers, colleagues, at least in some places. I think that sometimes we in California think that what's happening here is happening in Oklahoma or Texas or southern Georgia, where I was a young girl. I don't think so. If you could flip to the next slide. I do know that many young LGBTQ+ children today have it rough. The data show that there's a disproportionate number of homeless youth that identify as LGBTQ+. That's 40%. That's 1.68 million young people who identify as LGBTQ+ that are on the streets. And they're only estimated, I looked at like several different websites that said, well, I thought, well, how many LGBTQ+ kids are there in terms of youth? And I got a range, 3 to 10%. So if they're 3 to 10% of the total youth population, why are they 40% of the homeless? Well, why? Because many of these kids are kicked out of their homes by their parents. These are data coming out of the National Network for Youth. I can tell you that when I was 15 and questioning, I was a little wisp of a thing. And if my parents, who were loving, if they had kicked me out of my home at that point in my life, I know I wouldn't be standing here right now talking to you. I don't know, I'd probably be dead because I probably weighed about 85 pounds and whew, tough. Homeless youth are targets for all sorts of abuse, from drug abuse to prostitution. There are, and I am quoting here from the National Network for Youth, more likely to experience assault, trauma, depression, and suicide when compared to non-LGBTQ+ populations while also experiencing homelessness. The Trevor Project, which is a national and now it's gone global organization whose mission is to end suicide for LGBTQ+ young people, has stated that suicide is the second to third largest cause of death in children aged 10 to 14 and aged 15 to 24. That's all youth. But when you look at when you break that down into the LGBTQ+ youth, and this is coming out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's 2022 data, the LGBTQ+ children are at a significantly increased risk, more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. The loss of these young people is tragic and preventable. Again, discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant, and blatant to subtle. So moving on. What about adulthood? Well, I truly believed that the risks of being openly gay were getting better. I mean, we could get married. It took me 3 times, once in San Francisco, once in the state of California, and then finally it was federally approved. But, I got married and was married for 18 years to the same woman, and it was wonderful. But that shouldn't be. Side note, currently 32 states have same-sex marriage bans in their constitutions and or in their state legislation. So why would that be? Why would they have those bans? This is a federally approved right. Well, so is abortion, right? The sanctity of marriage is at risk today. Following the Supreme Court overturn of Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas suggested that the court may next revisit Obergefell versus Hodges. I think you know Roe versus Wade, but I don't know if you know that one. This is the 2015 Supreme Court ruling that stated that the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution required that all states license same-sex marriages and recognize same-sex marriages that were lawfully performed out of state. 2015. So if you were a person that was married to a man married to a man, and your job transferred you to a state that didn't recognize your marriage, what do you do? And what if they overturn that law, that ruling? What happens? You have to move to pull your, anyway, that's another story. Really, I just can't imagine the havoc. But still today, you know, we can buy a house together, we can buy a car, we can buy car insurance, we can get health insurance. I will say a national car carrier refused to give my partner and I car insurance because they didn't recognize the relationship between a woman and a woman, although they did, an unmarried man and woman. That was a couple years ago. Anyway, I think it was starting to look possible to live openly in the United States, but recent events, I think, have reversed some of that, in my opinion. Part of the current political climate has empowered some people to think that it's okay for them to challenge, to threaten, to inflict damage on other people or on their person, to restrict their rights, to even promote the firing, evicting, taking their children away, not hiring them, not baking them a wedding cake with 2 same-sex figures on it, all because of the choice that they've made of who to love. What does it matter? The fact also that currently the American Civil Liberties Union is tracking 425 state laws that attack the rights of LGBTQ plus people in the U.S. should be alarming to everyone in this room. What I know about the Holocaust is that they first came after the Jewish people, then they came after the gay people, and who was next? Right? 6 million homosexuals were lost in the Holocaust, murdered. Discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant. According to the FBI's 2023 annual report on crime, attacks on gender identity are up 32.9% from the prior year, and attacks based on sexual orientation are up 13.8%. These statistics are not celebratory. They're not something to jump up and be happy about, right? So do I think things have changed for the best? Not so sure, not yet. In some ways, being in the closet, as I was in the 70s and 80s, felt a little safer. I have friends that get their cars keyed. Once somebody was at a stop sign was screaming and yelling and flipping me off, and I didn't know what I'd done. I thought, well, did I accidentally not use my signal? And so I rolled them into my window to ask, and I was being called all sorts of names just because of a symbol on my car, the equal sign. The equality sign is a sign that's been around for decades. And this is a sign that's saying we deserve the same rights that everybody else. And this isn't something that just gay people use. People that are friends of gays or parents of gay people put these on their cars. It's a sign of solidarity, of support. And there are many of these up here, if any of you want. Maddox was so kind to bring a bunch. So at any rate, a lot of things have are happening now. And you know, I'm not so sure this is the kind of what you were expecting to hear in this talk. But when you live differently, when you are different, and people treat you different because of who you are, you have to adjust. In my life, I've had my tires slashed coming out of a grocery store. I was chased through a parking lot leaving a Cirque du Soleil event by 3 men. I had a senior colleague who was on my retention, tenure, and promotion committee approach me in the parking lot as I was walking with my books to go teach a class because I had spoken at a gay straight alliance in support of San Leandro School District, and my name got put into a Christian newsletter. This man sat on my RTP committee, and he approached me and admonished me for my life choices, personal choices, as he clutched the crucifix that he wore around his neck. I don't get it. I have a lot of Christian friends, and they're lovely people, but some aren't. So what did all this do? All these sorts of events that happened to me, well, they leave an impression. Be careful. Don't let them know. Be ready to be attacked at any time. Imagine living your life like that. It's hard to be you under such circumstances. Discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant. Moving on, I attended UC Berkeley, had a wonderful time. It was in the 70s and 80s. Oh, it was in the 80s. I'm not that old. But sorry, some of you. It was in the 80s. It was a lot of fun, but I was super busy. And, things happened, but I did graduate from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, began a postdoc at UC. There, I was working with a faculty member a new faculty member who had a student who had come via a Christian ministry, a Catholic ministry, to the U.S. from Ethiopia. This man was a little older, an older student. I was training him, collecting data in the field for publications for this new faculty member. And one night, we were all talking about our lives, and the professor was asking him, what was it like in Ethiopia? What did you do? And he revealed that he had been a child soldier, and that he had been on a team that would cross over into the neighboring country of Eritrea, and these two countries had been in conflict for decades, and they would murder gay people in the night. And I was just shocked, and the professor was like, wow, wanting to know more. Well, I fell back. I used my gay brother a lot. I'm so glad I have one. And I basically asked him, I said, well, I have a gay brother. Do you still feel this way? Would you kill my brother? And he said, yes. He said, gay people are evil, and their gayness justifies their being murdered. This was a young man living here at UC Berkeley. Well, I slept in a tent that night, and the next day I went to the professor and said, I don't feel comfortable being around this person. I don't feel safe. And she said, Rita, he adores you. He looks up to you. He respects you. Just tell him you're gay, and then everything will be okay. I said, you know what? I have a better idea. You tell him you're gay, and let's see how that works out. So, needless to say, she refused to replace him. So instead, her postdoc, moi, left the research group. And that woman, that professor, published many papers, never acknowledged me. Discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant. Then I went on. I went to San Jose State University as a professor in civil and environmental engineering. A stunning career, loved it. Best job ever. Being a professor, doing research on an amazing array of subjects, teaching, I loved it. But I was also a lesbian in a tenure-track position in a department that was rife with misogyny and racism and sexism and homophobia and gender discrimination. I mean, I'm sorry, it was an older generation. So now I'm 68, but back then I was, in my late 30s. And so the older folks were in their 60s, and most of them are gone now. I shouldn't say that. But most of them have left this, what do they call it, cross the rainbow or something. But I was scared, and I was still in the closet, very careful with my pronouns. You had to be back then. There was only one other woman in the department. I have lots of horror stories about that career choice, but my first faculty meeting, very first faculty meeting, coming out and into our celebratory meeting just within the department, a bunch of the fellows were all laughing, and I walked up and joined them. Hi, I'm the newbie, right? And they're telling, I realized, jokes about young gay men dying of AIDS, getting horribly sick. Once again, thank goodness for Michael, my brother, I hid behind him. And I stepped back from that circle of laughing fellas, and I said, I can't believe that you are telling jokes and laughing about young men in the prime of their lives dying of a horrible disease. This isn't a laughing matter, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. And then I walked away, and only one person in that group, who was a very dear friend, who was also shocked and appalled, apologized. Now, I wasn't in a department, and my experience in academia was not full of all ogres and horrible people. The majority of them were absolutely supportive, loving, kind, professional, highly respected people. But all of you know, it only takes one bad apple. Do you know that analogy there? Yeah, you're familiar with that over there? You know, to spoil the whole bunch, don't get me started. So I didn't know what to do, you know. It was my first week, and I realized, ooh, maybe I should have gone to that other university to work, right? But I was, you know, in a relationship. I was in my town. So I went to faculty affairs, and I said, I need help on figuring out how to cope, how to manage in this kind of environment. Give me some tools to help me. And they said, their advice, don't hide. Be yourself. Be open. Because if you hide, then if you don't hide, if you come out, then the bigots will have to work even harder to discriminate against you. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to, you know, they're the experts. I'm an engineer. I'm not a sociologist, right? So I thought I'm going to follow through, and I took their advice, even though a friend warned me that hey, you know, Rhea, that's like putting a target on your back. But every year in October on National Coming Out Day, I came out to somebody new. And I picked the easy ones, you know, first. I am smart. You know, and I found out one was a member of PFLAG. He and his wife were very active in the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. Another one had a gay son. And one of the fellows who was in my same cohort, we were hired within a few years of each other. We went to lunch every week. We had coffee most evenings when we had night classes because, you know, you have to stay up. You can't be just, let me teach you about this. You have to be like on with your students, right? And so this was a friend. And we went to a restaurant as we did, and when I came out to him, he stood up so vehemently that his chair fell over, and he had this horrific look on his face. And he said, I can't handle this. And he stormed out of the room, out of the restaurant, and he never spoke to me again in a civil manner, ever. And in fact, this fellow was extremely smart, but he was also really evil, a terrible combination, as you can imagine. And he did everything he could to make my academic life miserable. I became a target. Again, discrimination takes many forms, from subtle to blatant. Now, keep in mind, students were being harassed as well at this time. So I posted this little flag. This isn't the same one because they've been stolen so many times off my door. But I had this outside of my door, and I had a safe space sticker on my wall so that the students that were gay knew that they could come there and have someone to talk to. You know, again, I taught engineering classes, but sometimes they need help. And their stories were harrowing, and they covered the gamut from being kicked out to excluded to just, you know, not being accepted. But one student stood out in particular. This was a student who had excellent grades, straight A student, fantastic young woman, but she was struggling with her sexuality. She was confused, she was lost, she was depressed, alcoholic, considering suicide. She came to me because of that on the door and asked if I would help her. And she followed my advice. She took a year's leave of absence officially through the campus. She dropped the semester that she was great at earning Fs. She went to a therapist. She joined AA, changed her job, and healed. Came back a year and a half later, graduated magna cum laude from school. And years later, I didn't see her after that, but then years later, I was working on a project with a major environmental engineering firm in the Bay Area, and during a meeting, the lead engineer said, let's call in our resident expert and get her opinion. And in walks this student who had gotten a PhD from UC Berkeley, was an expert engineer, and I'm sitting down at a table, but she looked at me and I looked up at her and I thought, we're either gonna cry or we're gonna laugh, you know? And we smiled at each other. Later on, we met up. We're still friends. I follow her on, you know, Facebook. It's great. It's a success story that illustrates how critical it is for young people to seek out support and to get it. So it was the students that kept me engaged. They kept me working in research despite a very difficult work environment. which, you know, I'm a nice person. This meanness was because people couldn't accept me. And, you know, you don't bring your personal life into your classroom when you're an engineer. I think you do more when you're maybe in some other disciplines, but I was never an out person with my students. Well, my grad students that were working on my research project, they knew my life. But I left teaching and became a university administrator, had a lovely time. But it wasn't a job I was passionate about. But still, despite this life story, I believe there's hope and promise for a better world, in that young people today, like these young people here, they're being raised with a consciousness that the youth of my time didn't even know existed. You, members of the panel, are going to be the torch bearers of tomorrow. You will address the challenges that are coming, and there will be some, and you'll hopefully do so with the support of people like me who fought some of the earlier battles, and their allies, like people like you. I hope everyone here will be an ally. So my take-homes for today's youth, based on my lessons, are to be you and be aware. Take notes. Make sure you keep a calendar. Use policy. Know it and use it. Be fearless, but be kind, and be smart. Pick your battles carefully. Always have an ally. Never go into a room with an adversary without someone there by your side. For the audience as an ally, speak up when people are telling homophobic, racist jokes. You can say something like, "This isn't funny. I don't want to be a part of this," and walk away. You don't have to say, "You're a mean person," telling that nasty joke, right? That's attack. Be a mentor. Use your position, if you're still working, to redirect policy. Identify ways of being inclusive. Join an organization like some of these here, or Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. You know, make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria. So now we're going to transition over to the panel led by Maddox. So here you go.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Maddox Eckerling. I use he, him pronouns, and I am currently a first-year student at San Francisco State studying sociology and political science. Before I introduce the panelists and we go into our discussion today, I just wanted to let you know of a really cool resource that we put at all of your tables. Here, I'll stand for this. So this was put together by Affirming Ministries, and it has just some really good language to know about the LGBTQ community. And it's a great glossary. I've been working on putting one together, and then I found this, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Less work for me. So, so go ahead and, you know, as we're talking today, if there's a term that comes up that you're not sure what it means, chances are it's on here. If for some reason it's not on here, I'll go ahead and explain whatever that term is. But this is a great resource to just have for you throughout today and to just know in the future. But I do want to just real quickly run us through one bit, and that's on this first page here in the middle. I'm just going to read us some differences here. So I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between gender and sexuality. So gender describes more who you are, and sexuality describes your relationship or non-relationship to others. And so you can be both cisgender or transgender under the transgender umbrella, as well as having a sexuality, right? So you have both a gender and a sexuality. Everyone has that. And then there's different genders and sexualities throughout that. So just something to know that those are two separate terms. They're two separate things. Gender is the social, cultural, and psychological traits or actions that correspond with being masculine, feminine, both, neither, or anywhere on that spectrum. And sexual orientation is the type of sexual, romantic, emotional, spiritual attraction that you may have towards others. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear that those are two separate things, and we all have both of them and experience them very differently. And we're going to explore that a little bit more today on the panel. So yeah, please feel free to use these terms as we go through today. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Aspen, who goes to Godoti and uses they, them pronouns. We have Aubrey, who goes to Godoti and uses she, her pronouns. And we have Joseph, who goes to Nevada Union and uses he, him pronouns. All right, so we'll get into discussion here. What is the biggest, or actually, first question, what inspired or prompted you to join this panel today?
Right. I really enjoy talking to people in our community, just in general, about a variety of different things. And I've done things like this with Maddox before, and so he really just asked if I wanted to, and I was like, I'd love to do something like this again. So.
Yeah, actually, I think Maddox kind of reached out, and Liv also helped reach out. That's Allison's daughter, and so I have done a few panels before, but not on this topic. I did a youth science panel for the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, talking about like creek monitoring and watersheds, which was lovely. And I just like love to take the opportunity to talk about something that's really close to my heart and that I feel like is especially important in this area, living in a rural county.
Awesome. And I want to start with Aubrey on this next one. What is the biggest or most common misconception about LGBTQ people?
I'm not entirely sure about this one. Probably just that we're not normal people. We're just different in any way. Not just a normal person that's gay. I don't know.
I feel like this maybe isn't as much common, but maybe that gay people are pedophiles. Like, I've unfortunately seen that one online a lot, and maybe that I think I definitely agree with Aubrey on that one. But yeah, so.
Awesome. And what type of negative reaction or pushback have you experienced or seen in our community? This could be personal, something you've experienced if you want to share, or something you've just seen with the community at large. What kind of pushback have you experienced being around the LGBTQ community?
I haven't really had any. It's been mostly good. I don't really interact with people that much. And I go to Godoti, so like it's not as big a deal as like NU, I imagine, is pretty bad, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, Godoti is a bit of a smaller school compared to NU. NU has a lot of variety of different people, and sometimes it's a lot harder to find your group or your people in general. And I've had a lot of negative reactions to people really seeing me, especially when I was younger and a lot more colorful, probably, freshman year. I think, yeah, there's quite a few negative things, mostly people who just don't understand what they're talking about or what they're thinking, and so their first reaction is to be negative about it.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And, pushback can come in a lot of ways. It can come from, like Joseph is talking about with, actually saying things negatively. But it could also be things like blatantly just saying, no, you're not, when someone comes out. I know a lot of people have experienced this where they've come out and the person they come out to just says, nah, no. How about no? I don't think so. And I think that's the huge one that people get. And sometimes people are like, okay, that's fine. And then they go to all their friends and, they tell you all their friends about you and they, out you to all their friends. And so that could be another negative reaction that is coming out of it. And so it has so many different ways that it can manifest. And I think that's one of the biggest things to address when we're talking about the LGBTQ community and we're talking about these issues is everything is so nuanced and it's very individual in how it's experienced and what happens, that the four of us can sit up here and we can explain to you our personal experiences and what we feel. But at the end of the day, it's going to look different for everybody. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of experiences that unfortunately we aren't able to showcase today. And so I think it's just important to make sure that we're always keeping an open mind when talking about these things and to know that the experiences that we're showing are not the only experiences and they're not the end all be all. And the advice that we give today, while it's great advice because we're all great, it's not, how everybody experiences things. And so the best thing to always do is just ask as we're going through and make sure that you're understanding the individual and not just being like, oh, well, I sat on a panel once and I heard them say you should do this, but making sure that we're being inclusive of that. So yeah, let's go to the next question. What kinds of things might a person who is LGBTQ go through when coming out? Excuse me.
Well, I think, Max, you said it pretty good before, like people just telling you, no, you're not, or people like automatically assuming you have a crush on them because like they're the same gender as you, which is not a pleasant feeling, especially if they're not your type like at all. And also just people like spreading that information without your consent, like even parents too, like talking to their friends, even if they kind of assume that, oh, well, this person is accepting, so I guess my child would be fine with me telling them. But it's such a personal thing that that's not how it works. And I think also people misgendering you a lot, like after you come out. And I mean, a lot of people are really nice about it, and like, or even like over apologizing if they misgender you, which can be very awkward. Just kind of moving on with grace, I guess, is what I would prefer.
I think the only other thing that I wanted to add, which is something that was already said, was the pain of losing people in your life, people who you might have known for a really long time, childhood friends, things like that, who just say these sorts of things. They might start with something like, no, you're not, and it escalates, and then it becomes, well, maybe we just shouldn't hang out anymore. And that's always a really hard thing when you're coming out, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can the audience here make themselves more approachable to the LGBTQ community? And let's say one of us come out to them. How might be the best reaction? What can they say or do, when you come out, but also before you come out to express that they're a safe person to come out to?
I mean, honestly, just maybe thanking them for trusting you with that information, because that's often a really hard thing to do. And Like, also maybe don't pepper the person with questions immediately, because that can feel very scary almost when you're already in a scary place. And so just kind of give them time after they've told you that, and because it is basically somebody either at or close to their most vulnerable. And in terms of making yourself more approachable, honestly, just like, you know, I mean, you can always like put like one of those equality stickers on your car if you feel so inclined, or just you could put like a little pin on your bag if you wanted. But obviously, if you feel like you're not in a safe place to do so, then don't. But yeah, so just kind of maybe little visible statements if you wanted.
Um, I think, yeah, one of the biggest things that was also already talked about is things like this that will make really anyone more approachable. When we talk about symbols like the flag or like the equality, that are just things where it's a visible representation of I am a safe person that you can talk to.
Yeah. Aubrey, do you have anything to say specifically to the question about what to do when someone comes out, and how you can best? No. Okay. So I just want to also talk about on this one that when someone comes out to you, what they're really doing is inviting you in. They're inviting you into their personal life. They're inviting you into their very vulnerable moments in their own life. And so it's not as though you're sitting out and they just, are coming out and like joining you. What they're doing is they're inviting you to come and join them, right? It's not, it's really coming in. And so when someone comes out, the most important thing to do is to be respectful and say, hey, you're now inviting me into your vulnerable, loving spot. It's now my job to be a guest and to make myself welcome in that spot. So when someone comes out to you, they're inviting you to come in as a guest. So you're a guest in their vulnerability, and it's important to just remember that. So how can, we spoke about this a little bit already, but how can we show, and how can the people in this room show that they're in support of LGBTQ people, even if they're not necessarily want to just go up to LGBTQ people? Because it's definitely weird if you just see someone on the street, you're like, oh, that person's gay, I'm gonna go talk to them, right? Like, that's a little awkward. And I'm gonna be honest, if I'm walking the street and someone just runs up to me because I'm gay, I'm like, okay, you're cool, but like, that's a little weird, little jump scare. So maybe don't just go running up to people because they're gay. But how can we show that we're in support of them, and make sure that they know that they're okay to be safe in the environment that they're in? Do you guys have anything to add to that question? Yeah.
So first of all, if you're not close to any LGBTQ people, the first thing that I would say is if you come to more events where people like us are present, maybe events centered around Pride, you'll make some friends. And if you don't have any friends, or if you're just more of a selective person, like you have your group of people that you love very dearly, but you want to still be an ally, one of the biggest ways is to pay attention to legislation that is directly impacts queer people. Things about our life, like getting married, how we live in general is still a big question for a lot of teenagers on when or how this will change in our future. And so the biggest way to really be an ally is to just stay informed about that sort of thing.
And I also want to just add, pronouns are a big deal. I know pronouns have been a huge talking point lately. but they're really important that we use them because what they do is it's similar to wearing a pride pin. It's similar to just, going around saying that you're an ally, and it's really proving it. And what that does is it creates a safe space for others to also share their pronouns, but also to know that you're a safe person and to know that they're in a safe room. And so when going around and doing introductions, it's important that you say your name and your pronouns, and that way other people in the space know, hey, this is a safe space. And they know not only that you're not going to be able to, you're not going to take shit, and so those that might be of a more homophobic mindset now know that this is not a safe space for them to be homophobic, and so it's important to let them know that this is not the space to be homophobic in, and so by sharing your pronouns, you do that, and you also tell those who are part of the LGBTQ community that it's safe for them to be that in this space. And so it really sets the tone of the space, and it sets the tone of this is what is acceptable in this space, and this is what's not acceptable in this space, with a very simple thing of just simply sharing your pronouns. If anyone has questions on pronouns, how to use them, or anything like that, let's talk afterward. I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. But for now, just simply, when introducing yourself, try and use your pronouns. Okay, does anyone have anything to add there? Yeah, go ahead.
Just to kind of expand on Joey's point a little bit about paying attention to like legislation, I'd like to say there's a lot of amazing media resources out there too, and including like books, movies, documentaries, and even just reading about like the lived experiences of queer people can be an amazing step towards like understanding, and especially if you feel like you still might be a little confused or like what are all these terminologies? Like that little glossary is amazing for that. But if anybody wanted any good queer book recommendations, I am open for asking. So yeah, just to kind of expand your knowledge a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely really important. Thank you for adding that. All right, next question. In your coming out process, what has worked? What hasn't worked? What has been, you've noticed the best thing that's worked well or hasn't worked well?
So I'm guessing this question is around like what other people can do to make you feel better. And I think the number one thing is definitely just a reminder of like love and safety. If somebody close to you comes out to you, you can remind them like, yes, I care about you a lot, and this is something like you're an important person to me. One thing that I want to bring up is the saying, even though. A lot of people will say, even though you are gay, I still love you. And that can be kind of a backhanded or a hurtful response to coming out, where we could just say, yes, I love you, I care about you. And the other thing is affirmations. I'm coming out to a room full of people. I am a transgender teenager, I'm 17, and things like when my best friend would say, oh, you're so handsome. She says this to me every morning. She goes, oh, you're so handsome. And it makes me feel awesome, makes me feel great about myself. And those even really tiny things like that can just be a big thing for somebody.
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do to show support for a LGBTQ person is to compliment them. It shows that you see them, it shows that you care, and it shows that you're comfortable addressing what might be uncomfortable for them. And so no matter what it is, you should compliment people in general. If you see somebody wearing something cool, just compliment them. It makes everybody feel good. But especially if you want to show that you're trying to be there for someone, just compliment them. It's a really good way to start that conversation, get them to start feeling comfortable, and it can lead to great things. So simple things like just a quick little compliment is always a great first start when talking to someone. So we have this last question, and then I want to open it up to the floor a little bit here. So how should the audience approach somebody about their gender identity? And also just what thoughts this question might bring up in general?
I have one thing, which is what not to do. My friend, one day, a while ago, he would go up to people and he would show a picture of like man and woman next to each other and be like, "Which one are you?" It was funny, and he meant well, but don't do that. I think like the best thing is like go to them and be like, "Hey, what are your pronouns?" Or like introduce yourself with them, and then they're be likely to mention it to them back.
Sorry. Okay, yeah, something that somebody has actually said to me, which I kind of appreciated, was like I was at a friend's birthday party, and then they came up to me and were like, "Hey, I actually never caught your pronouns." And so it's kind of like something it doesn't have to be like a formal, like, what are your pronouns? Like, like a very formal, like, exchange, but it can just be something in casual conversation, too. And I think earlier, like, Max was mentioning about, like, saying your pronouns, like, if you go around and introduce yourself, just to kind of, like, tell somebody or signal to somebody that you are a welcoming person to tell that thing, because sometimes people might not be comfortable sharing their pronouns. Like, if, like, you're like me and use they, them pronouns, like, that's obviously, like, a signal to somebody that I'm non-binary, or at least, like, gender queer. And so it's kind of making sure that you also reciprocate that sharing.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is when you're talking to somebody about their identity specifically, I think the number one thing to do is when you're asking for clarification about something, if someone says something that you've never heard before, make sure that you're asking in a genuine tone. I know this is something that a lot of older people that I'm close to, like my aunts will do, is sometimes they'll be laughing while they're asking me a question. And a lot of times it feels disingenuine, or it feels like they don't really want to hear what I'm saying. And so I think the first thing is to just, while you're being curious and having an open mind, is to remember that, you want to hear what they're saying. You want to be genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like all the panelists have said, pronouns are the really important one. And when you go up to someone, it's not appropriate to ask them what their gender is. That's not an appropriate question to ask someone. It's appropriate to ask them what their pronouns are. Say, hey, I didn't catch them. What are your pronouns? You can ask someone their pronouns, and if they want to share more, that's up to them. But no one has the right to know someone else's identity. That's theirs. That's their information. If they want to share that, they can do it. But we don't ask for that. So you can ask for pronouns so you know how to properly address them and how to talk about them. But that's all the information you need to know about them. If they want to share more, that's completely up to them. And the other thing is when someone gives you their pronouns, that's not them explaining what their identity is. If someone uses certain pronouns, that does not equal the label that they use. There's a lot of labels out there, and some people don't like labels. Some people have very specific labels. And so if they want to share that with you, they can, but we just don't want to assume anything about anyone. So that's just an important note to keep. So before my final wrap-up question that I have for all the panelists, are there any questions in the room that anyone would like? And I can go ahead and field a few questions. We have a few minutes. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how pervasive is the word queer now accepted in
So the question is, how pervasive is the word queer? And so Joey seems to have a very good answer. So what do you got, Joey?
I'm sure many of you know that even just 20, 30 years ago, queer was a slur. It was something that was used against LGBTQ people for a long time. And since then, it's actually considered reclaimed. It's something that a lot of people will even use as an identity if they're unsure about themselves, or if they just don't want to really be exact or put an exact thing on it. They will just say, yes, I am queer. I'm LGBTQ in some form. And it's really, I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's something that I use often. And it's something that is often used with younger LGBTQ people. I do want to bring up the fact that there are plenty of older gay people who it's still a word that can be really hurtful to them, especially if it was said against them as they were younger. But I think a large majority of the LGBTQ consider it a positive word now.
Yeah, so just picking off what Joseph said, you know, like everything we're saying, we have to be careful. So if you're going to just use it, make sure that the people in the room are okay with it. But personally, I identify as queer because who I love, none of y'all's business. And frankly, I don't really, I do have a complicated label that I keep to the side for my own knowledge, but it's complicated, and so, you know, I don't want to go explaining that. So yeah, I'm queer, and that's what it is. Are there any other questions? Looks like we've got 3 here, so we'll start with you there. Are there any other community supports or resources that we would recommend? I mean, I have my vault always, but do any of you have something? Oh yes, the tables here are great resources. Locally, our biggest resources would be Nevada County Pride. Doing a lot of local stuff, but a lot of other orgs like the clinic do amazing work as well. I know they do a lot of gender affirming care as well, which is really important. And so we're so thankful that y'all do that. Unfortunately, because of the small community we live in, there's not a lot of like organizations and stuff. So these would be your best bets here. But in terms of online resources, the Trevor Project has amazing resources online. The Human Rights Campaign, who make and send these out, have amazing resources. They all also give like voter guides and information in terms of that as well. So as you all are doing your research, because it's an election year, I hope you're all registered. Go out and vote, woohoo! This is my first year voting, so I'm like extra excited. So they all have resources for that as well. So that's all a good place to go as well for different voting resources and stuff like that. I can also send a list to Lisa to send out to everybody of like, here's some really great places for further research if you want, as well as I'll send out a few voter guides as well to all of you. We had another question in the back there, yeah. How have the anti-queer bias in our schools changed in the past few years? Yeah, Aubrey?
So I go to Gadoti where like genuinely 40% of my class is some kind of LGBT. And so at Gadoti, things are really good. I have heard horror stories about NU. But I think it's maybe getting better.
So one of the biggest things in school is now it has progressed, fortunately, to a point where everyone who is an administrator in our school system recognizes LGBTQ people in a positive way. But unfortunately, anything that I would consider harmful between students is often chalked up to an argument or to something that is considered both sides at fault. if there is something that breaks out between two students where one of them is gay and the other one was picking on him or trying to fight with him, it is often chalked up to, well, you both need to apologize to each other. And because of the area that we live in specifically, it's very hard for administrators to really talk about being positive in a queer area, in a queer light. So because if an administrator tells a student, well, you need to be better and not be homophobic, that goes to their parents, who are often, you know, the teachers of these kids. And so then that becomes a problem between administrators and parents, which is a whole separate issue. And so I think in schools specifically, it really depends on where you are, how populated your area is. But yeah, it's really just, it still feels like a very neutral topic, especially here.
Yeah, I can say at my high school, I also went to Godoti. In my class, graduating class of 2023, I was the first out person in my class. And I was actually outed freshman year. And so then quickly became, you know, very out and open about it. And then y'all came along and like completely changed everything at our school. Because my grade and the grade just above me, there's only a few of us, but these next few grades, I don't know what's going on, but all of the LGBTQ people have flocked to Godoti in their grades, which is, it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, it definitely has changed a lot from my freshman year when I was outed and I was one of the only, so I think my freshman year I was one of 3 out people at the school. To now where there's 40% of the school is out and being themselves, and it's a beautiful thing. So it's definitely changed in just a few short years. And if I'm now also looking at going back to school, I'm in San Francisco, which everyone would think. I went there looking for love and people. There's no one there. I don't know what happened, but I think it just like got super in the news that that's where the gays went, and so we stopped going there. I don't know, but there's not very many people at my school, at least that are out, and a lot of those that I talk to are very much closeted still, and so I'm not sure what it is about, you know, being in college where it's still so not talked about. Which I then feel lucky coming and looking at y'all's school in this rural town, and there's 40%. So yeah, it's definitely, it's quite interesting. Thank you for that question. There was another question over here. Someone had like gone first round, yeah.
My sister-in-law and I are kind of stumped because we have a family member who, you know, they're in their 60s, never has come out. We really suspect that, you know, that he's gay, but I can't exactly go up to him and ask his pronouns at this point. But, you know, there's a sadness that we feel because we would, you know, like to honor his choices, but yet, what do you do as family members?
Yeah, all you can do is show that you're a safe space, you know, and just show that if he came out to you, you would be welcoming and you're loving, you know, put a rainbow flag in your house. You know, there's all you can do is show him that you would love him, and he has to unfortunately just choose whether or not he's going to come out. Because yeah, you can't force anything on anyone. So all you can do is continuously show how supportive you are. Maybe even during Pride this year, you can invite him out to Pride. Be like, hey, I'm going to Pride this year. Would you like to come? That's totally an appropriate thing to do. And maybe he'll feel more comfortable doing it there. But yeah, unfortunately, all you can keep doing is keep showing that you're loving and supporting, and that's something that you would love. But yeah. Yeah.
What does the plus stand for? Is it a placeholder?
So the plus is for everything else. Joey, yeah, Joey. I'll let you do it.
Okay, so this is gonna be your best friend right now. No, not quite like that. But so the plus, first of all, we have LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer or questioning is another way that can be used. And then the plus is really pretty much everything else that's on here. It's everything that isn't included in the first layers of the acronym, and that can include stuff like being non-binary, being genderqueer, and a lot of the labels that somebody might go, oh, well, what is that? I've never heard of that before, are considered included in the plus, as well as Two-Spirit people who are Native Americans, like my mother. And yeah, that's really mostly it.
Yeah, and I would also like to kind of include like asexual, aromantic. Sometimes it's LGBTQIA plus is how you might see it sometimes, and that would be intersex and aromantic, asexual, and all of these things come under a huge spectrum, like what we like to call umbrellas. So like there's the trans umbrella, there's the like aromantic umbrella, the asexual umbrella, and that kind of, there's so many. And like and I mean, you can also just Google something. If somebody tells you a label and you don't know what it is, you can always just like, hey Google, what's this? Like it's totally okay to be curious.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a wonderful question. Thank you. Yeah.
I have two grandsons. They're in their 20s. Both are past college age. And I really suspect are probably gay. And they have not, in my knowledge at least, come out to anybody in the family. And I've been mulling over this issue about how to let them know I'm safe and loving and accepting. But I don't want to have that come across that way. And they're not gay, and and that might rupture our relationship. I don't know what to do about it.
Put up a flag in your house.
Yeah, so you can put up a flag because there's things you can do without going directly to them, right? You don't have to go to them and be like, I'm an ally, right? Instead, you can do other things that they'll be able to see. You can put up one of these stickers. You can grab, I always keep one with me. You can just grab a rainbow flag and just hang it up, right? I always keep one with me. You never know what's going to come in handy. But you can put one up. You could specifically do it during Pride Month. That's a good way to start it for you. A lot of people are like, well, I kind of feel a little awkward just randomly doing that. And so Pride Month is a really great to do it because that's the month that we celebrate Pride, right? And so put in, Pride Month is June. That's important, thank you so much. So in June, that's the month that the LGBTQ community celebrates just love in general. We just celebrate being, and that's our month to really just be out. And that's a month that a lot of people come out during. And so during that month, it's a great excuse to put up a flag and then never take it down. But it's a great first month to put one up. And also, putting these up are always a great time. You can put them in your window as well. They don't have to go on a car. There's just showing little symbols out there is really important, that you don't necessarily have to go around saying that you're, an ally. You can just show it using symbols, and rainbows is the best way to do that. There's a question we had right back there. Yeah.
I know that a few years ago, this is probably mostly for Joseph, I know a few years ago there was sort of a push by some of the parents to remove books from the NU library, like gender, queer, and other diversity-based books. Were those attempts successful? And if they were, what could a group like this do to get those books into the hands of the students?
So the question is, a few years ago, there was some push to get rid of some LGBTQ-related books in the NU library, and so the question is, was that successful?
So actually just a few weeks ago, we had a lovely little stand in our school library labeled Banned Books Across the Country, and Genderqueer was one of them. And that actually led me to reading it. And, and so, no, Genderqueer was not removed from the NU library, and neither has any book been moved from the NU library for any reason. Whenever this comes up, this is usually a hard thing for people to really get into unless they have children or grandchildren who are in school, but this usually comes up through board meetings, especially district board meetings, and through public legislation around public high schools banning books in general. So if you just keep an eye out for that sort of thing if you're worried about it at all. But NU has been safe from any sort of book banning.
And read a banned book. Like I think the oh gosh, the ACLU has like a great list of banned books from across the country. I highly encourage you to go find that list and read a book off of it. And I know some libraries will have like Banned Books Week. They'll celebrate that and put out a stand of banned books. But it's just a really great way to kind of be more in tune with what's happening around our country too.
Yeah, if you walk into the Nevada County Public Library and you just go to the circulation desk and you say, hey, I want to read a banned book, they will help you out. They would love to do that. They've got their list, they know them. So banned book, yeah, there's lists online. You can also just go into the library and they'll help you out. I think we have time for like 2 or 3 more questions. So we'll go 1, 2. Yeah.
I understand NU has a gay-straight alliance, and I'm wondering how large it is and how that's helped the situation, bringing people together.
Yeah, so I know NU has one, and I'll let you talk about that in a second. I also know Godoti has one. When I was there, I was the president, and it was thriving. I don't know if it's still thriving. It's not thriving. Okay, we will fix that. We'll come back to this later. So Godoti did have a thriving one. Apparently, it needs a little help, but there's definitely a need for it. How's it going at NU?
So ours is a bit small, and I think that's less of a queer kid problem and more of just a clique issue. There's a lot of like very specific groups of kids who really just keep to themselves and they don't like to cross over with anyone else, regardless of if they're both gay or not. And so that's part of why ours is a bit smaller, even though we have a few gay kids. But our president, Cameron, is a wonderful guy, and he's been, I know they've been talking about things like a all-gender bathroom, or like another one, actually. We currently have one for the entire campus, and it is hidden behind lock and key in the front office. And it is also used by visitation and staff. So if you have the key that's in the front office, they might just use their own key to get, which is its own problem. So I know that there's work being done to try to get more safe spaces like that on campus.
Doesn't Bright Futures also have a Rainbow Club?
Yeah, Bright Futures for Youth, which is over in the Lytton building up behind Briar Patch. They're an incredible organization. If you want to give money to people helping youth, give them lots of money. They're an amazing organization, Bright Futures for Youth, and they do have a Rainbow Club. It's absolutely amazing. They're trying to expand it with the creation of the now Neo Center. It hopefully will be expanding in the next few years. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a really wonderful organization and program that they have there. And I will also say, just going back to the GSA question, that GSAs are really hard in high schools because a lot of queer youth nowadays don't want to sit around in a room and talk about being queer. It's not the vibe. And so a lot of them just want to hang out with their friends and happen to be queer on the side. And that's what we're seeing is a big trend, is people just want to be out. People can know that they're queer, and then they're going to live their life however they're going to live it. And so spaces like a GSA are a little bit less popular, but they're still completely needed, and they are still popular by some. And I think they're mostly used, or at least when I was running it, it's really a good place for like questioning people to come in and get their support, and find community if they don't have any community that they can help find. So we have one more question here. Yeah?
I'm curious to understand what your guys' suggestion is in policy setting for youth that are under 18 in transitioning through either surgery or medication. I'm curious.
So I'm going to kind of get a little bit deeper into this because this is very pertaining to my life. One thing that is a common misconception that a lot of people have argued about is children getting surgery. Now, this is something that I will tell you right now, no child is getting surgery. They don't need surgery. They don't have, if they haven't gone through puberty, there is nothing a part of them that is needing to maybe get changed surgically. There is, however, puberty blockers, which is something that somebody will take to prolong puberty. And this is another thing that I will tell you does not harm children. It is something where if they take puberty blockers and then at 13 they go, well, I don't think I feel this way anymore, they can stop taking them and have a regular puberty. Or if they go, yes, I am transgender and I would like to start taking separate hormones, maybe estrogen or testosterone, depending, then the puberty blockers will prevent puberty of their born gender or born sex, and they can then take separate hormones for to have a different puberty. And this is something that goes through our legislation, especially right now. Like just in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of talk around transgender children, and this is something where, honestly, you have to have faith that somebody, a teenager especially, someone like me, knows their own brain better than you know their brain. And that's not something that just goes for teenagers, of course, that's something that goes for everybody. Everyone knows their own brain better than you know their brain. And this is part of why we like to talk about this sort of thing, is so that it's more open and you guys have the knowledge also. So this is something that is, I'm not really sure how much further we want to go into that, but those are the basics of it. As a 17-year-old, surgeries and that sort of thing are very difficult to have access to still. It is something that is more open fully after 18. Teenagers from 14, 15 through 18 might be able to get surgery. I do know transgender teenagers who have had surgery before, but that does not mean that it is readily available or it is something that you can just jump into straight away. It is a process that you have to go through over months or even years of talking to doctors, therapists, and psychologists about whether they think that you're trans enough to have surgery, which is its own separate problem.
Yeah. All right, so we look like we're at time. So just each of the panelists, one one quick last word that you have for our audience today as we wrap stuff up. We'll start with you, Aspen, and we'll just come on down. One last question, or one last comment or something that you have to say to the audience.
Well, I mean, I think it would just be to start like engaging with queer media, and like personally that has been like instrumental in being able to discover myself and who I am more, is like watching like movies by queer filmmakers or reading books by queer authors. They don't even have to be nonfiction. They can be like a fun fantasy book that has good representation. And also it like something to maybe start looking into if you're interested is like the intersection of queer identities with other minority groups, because that can be a really big thing, and maybe affects some of you as well. And it can come with its own unique experiences and challenges. So that's very interesting. And pay attention to what's happening in the schools too. Because like if something's happening at like the school board level, like they have amazing they have like public comments, so you can always come and help support queer teens in schools. So keep an eye on that.
Gay people are cool. Hang out with them. Go to events like this, meet people, become friends, hang out, talk to them. If there's ever any kind of legislation meetings, go there. Don't let people do bad things. Just be cool.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all for letting us talk and coming and having an open mind for this. And I also want to say that I am a very friendly and personable person outside of this. So if you have questions about me personally or about my personal beliefs and things like that that are outside of this sort of setting, you can always come up to me and ask me, and I'll let you know. Or if you have any sort of questions about things in general, you can also ask me.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I want to say thank you all so much for coming. It's been a blast to come and continue conversations like this. Yeah, I think the big thing to just remember is, excuse me, the biggest thing to remember is that everybody's different. And so we need to just make sure that we're being respectful of everybody, no matter their differences. Our words matter. Your words matter. Be kind with them. And yeah, I would just want to say, if anyone needs any, I'm going to just hang out here for a bit. But if anybody needs to get in contact with me for any reason, or you have more questions, you all have contact with Lisa. Just send her an email and say that it's for me, and she'll forward it over to me, and I will respond as soon as I can in between all of my million assignments, because college is hard. Yeah, you all know, right? But I am always here to talk and continue this education and continue on this learning journey that we are all on. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for your questions. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening.